Well, this morning in our study here, we have, maybe for the only time this whole quarter, our whole lesson text is from one place. So we won't be jumping anywhere else. But if you want to turn to Luke chapter 24, that is the place to be. We've been following Jesus, more or less. Different places. It's really just another way of studying Jesus' ministry, I guess, by location, instead of one of the, I guess, several other ways we could study some of Jesus' ministry. And this time we are brought to a place called Emmaus, which is down here. We're not in Galilee today, but we're back down in Judea, near to Jerusalem. And you probably are familiar with this place, or you might be, mainly because of this one event that happened. And some of it didn't even happen there, but happened on the road, on the way there. Some of the places that we see associated with Jesus' ministry are found multiple times, some of them many times. Like we talked about Capernaum and how that place became known as Jesus' home, and so he was there quite a bit. That's why it was called his own city and home. So naturally, we're going to see Capernaum a lot in the gospel records when we go there. Jerusalem, obviously, is a place that's going to be mentioned many, many times. Other locations are not so frequent, and this is one of them, Emmaus, because this is the event, more or less, that we read about that took place in connection with Emmaus. It was about 7 miles from Jerusalem, according to verse 13. And yet, just because it's not mentioned a lot, just because Jesus didn't necessarily perform some great miracle there, like he did in some of these other places, doesn't mean that what did happen there in connection with this place was any less important or worthy of study. So, a conversation took place, we might say. And what's interesting is, when we look here, it was the day that Jesus rose from the grave. What we're about to read and study took place on the very day that Jesus rose from the grave. And he comes into contact with two individuals here. There's really not much else to say before we get right into it without just saying what happened. So that's what we're going to do. Luke chapter 24, we're not looking at the whole chapter 24, but starting in verse 13, that's where our text begins. The longest section is this first one. So we'll start reading in verse 13 here. If you want to know about where we get that it's the day of Jesus' resurrection, you just compare verse 1 with verse 13. Okay? On the first day of the week, the first 12 verses are the account of the women going to the tomb and finding it empty, or the stone rolled away. Then verse 13 begins like this. That very day, 2 of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. So, that sets up what's happening here. Excuse me one moment. I'm going to I'm going to get this where I can see without turning around. Really put my eyes to the test, but at least I won't maybe have to turn around. So, notice how it says, two of them. Well, two of whom? Well, it seems two disciples. Two, if you back up, Mary Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them, who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale. They didn't believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb, stooping and looking in. He saw the linen cloths by themselves, went home, marveled at what happened. That very day, two of them, so I guess you could just take your pick on who them might be. We know one of them, we're told who he is. Or let me take that back. We're told what his name is. The other one, not revealed. But they're walking from Jerusalem, 7-mile walk. Certainly not a short walk, I guess. And what more would they be talking about than all these things that had happened? All the things. When you take into consideration what we just read about in verses 1 through 12, I can't help but think that's probably more, or at least just as much on their minds as what happened before that. The events leading up. So the news just kept evolving. First, they're trying to process the fact that Jesus of Nazareth was dead, or I should say, had been killed. Of course, they thought he was dead still. But then also, it seems there's some sort of connection here to them knowing about the fact that at least word had been given, or somebody had been saying that the tomb was empty. So they're talking about all of this, trying to make sense of all of this, these details that they keep learning. It becomes more and more fascinating as we can understand. But while they were talking, all of a sudden, Jesus, the man about whom they're talking, comes out of nowhere, so to speak, and he's there. I guess he sort of catches up with them. He's walking with them, or gets their attention. We haven't gotten there yet, but the key here at this point is they don't know it's him. And we're told by Luke the reason they don't know it's him. What is that reason? Notice the word kept from. That's two words, sorry. Kept. That is a word that indicates some outside force was preventing them from recognizing him. Now, we could get into the question of why, but there's no real reason to even speculate on that because we don't know why. We just know that that's what was happening. They didn't know it was Jesus. So, he said to them, so now there's three men walking together. The two friends and disciples, it seems, and this stranger. I'll paraphrase. What are y'all talking about? Because that's how I would say it if it was me. And that's basically what he said. What is this conversation that you're holding with each other as you walk? What are y'all talking about? And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have happened there in these days?" Or again, to paraphrase, you may be the only person in the whole city that doesn't know what's just happened. Presumably, he was also walking from Jerusalem. see, they're walking from Jerusalem. He comes up behind them or whatever. So, they assume he's coming back from Jerusalem. I'm sure there were several more people as well. Lots more, I'm sure. Yeah, where have you been? I mean, there's nothing else that we could possibly be talking about because of what's happened in Jerusalem in these days. And he said, what things? Yeah, Dean, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Pentecost, or Passover. Yes, you're right. Passover has just happened, and the next one was Pentecost. But that's why people will be leaving. A lot of people would have been there, and that means so many people would have, if not witnessed, heard the talk. There are a few things that go on in different places, even nationwide, I guess, that everybody knows about it, like Election Day. Presidential election. I mean, that's a time where so many people are engaged and focused on, the election. So it'd almost be like somebody comes and, you got the TV on some channel that's showing, how things are unfolding. It's like, what are y'all watching? What's going on? And you'd be like, what? You don't know what day it is? That's all you can find anywhere. Everybody's talking about it everywhere on every channel pretty much because that's the thing that's going on right now. Well, that's kind of how they felt. Everybody is talking about this. How is it that you don't know? You were there in the city or even near the city and you don't know what's happened? And he said, what? What's happened? What things? And they said, concerning Jesus, it's kind of like one of those, where do we even start? Like you said, so many things that happen. Where do you start? They said the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. There's a key to their sadness. Even if, they had understood that there was some updated news about, something has changed, the tomb was empty, they're still hung up on, we had hoped. Notice the past tense. That he was the one that was going to redeem Israel. Now he's dead or he's been killed. That's why they're sad. Not just because, not just in the sense that, Peter and the others, they would have shared that as well, but not just, oh no, I can't believe this innocent great man was killed. But we had hoped that he was the one that was going to redeem Israel. And guess what? Now that hope is squashed. Because he can't redeem Israel if he's dead. Yeah, Dean?
Well, that's if he's been waiting all his life for the Redeemer to renew his covenant. And Jesus was fulfilling some prophecies. They did that. So they were hoping that he was going to be the one to fulfill that and redeem Israel. And now here all of a sudden, he's gone.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why they were sad. So it was, I guess several things, but that's the thing they mentioned. Not just that he had been crucified, but, okay, so what does that have to do with you, right? Are you just sad because it's a sad story? No. We had hoped that he was We had hoped in him. But, their hope was a little bit misguided in the most immediate sense. So, he goes on to say, or they answered and said, yes, and besides all this, it's now the third day since these things happened. Moreover, some women of our company amazed us. They were at the tomb, and they didn't find his body. So now this is just new news that they can't even process. They came back saying that they had even seen a vision of angels who said he's alive. So they got a lot to think about. This was just almost, seems to be added like an additional, not an afterthought, but like additionally, now there's also this that we've heard. We're sad about that, but we're amazed at this. He said, some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said. But him they did not see. So Jesus of Nazareth was a man who was mighty in word and deed before God. He was a prophet, but the chief priests killed him, delivered him up to be killed, and crucified him. He was our hope, for redeeming Israel. And it's been 3 days now. But then some of the women of our company went to the tomb and said he wasn't in there anymore. And then some of the others of our company went and confirmed what they said. He's not in there. But they also said, some angels told them that the reason he's not in there is because he's alive. So how would you process all that? Well, how did Jesus respond? Here's what he said. O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Remember, they don't know it's Jesus. They don't know it's him. Obviously, they don't know they're talking to him, or they wouldn't have just told him all that. They would have said, what do you mean, Lord? You know what's happened. You, of all people, know more than anybody what's happened. He said, O foolish ones, slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Leave it to Jesus to turn this into a teaching opportunity. He goes all the way to the prophets. He takes this down the road of the reason you're so confused and dismayed is because you don't know the Scriptures. He didn't say it like that, but he has said it like that to other people during his ministry. You don't know the power, you don't know the Scriptures nor the power of God. The reason you're so confused and dismayed is because you are slow to believe what the prophets have spoken. Which implies, by the way, the prophets have spoken everything that everything you just said was going to happen. Was it not necessary, there's a key word, that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory? Wasn't that necessary, especially considering what the prophets have spoken? These things that you've just described were supposed to happen. They were necessary to happen according to him. And here's one of the most powerful statements. Not just here, but anywhere considering the person of Jesus. And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the Scriptures the things concerning himself. In other words, the Old Testament, the prophets, even Moses. Moses wrote about Jesus. The prophets wrote about Jesus, spoke about Jesus. All the Scriptures are full of things concerning him. And he said so. And Luke here says so. Now, that's just a summary of the way the rest of this conversation went. Wouldn't it be great, to have had the unabridged version, But that's how Jesus took over. He hijacked this conversation. Now what's he doing? He's doing what Paul went around doing everywhere. Reasoning from the scriptures that Jesus is the Christ and that everything that happened to him was not just a good thing for mankind, not just, needed, not just was supposed to happen, but it was all God's plan. And the prophets said so. That's what he's teaching them, breaking it down, showing them that it was necessary, and the prophets foretold that that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory. Yes, sir.
We would have been living back in that day with just even with the knowledge they had, with the disciples, we would work.
Yeah.
I was playing this the other day, somebody writing me something dead, isn't it?
Yeah, and he says, slow to believe. Remember, it's not just the prophets that had told at least the apostles that this was going to happen. He told them at least 3 times, directly, plainly. I mean, you can't get any plainer than saying, look, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to be taken by the chief priests. They're going to condemn me and crucify me. And then I'm going to rise on the third. I mean, how much plainer can he say it? Then he didn't say it in a parable. Now, there were times when he said it less clear, but he did eventually tell them straight to the point, this is going to happen. But they had the same problem at that time that these two had. They were slow to believe that. Yes, sir.
These two might not have heard it since they don't seem to be
Yeah, that's true.
of the apostles.
Yeah, these two, we don't know how. The only indication we have of their connection with them is that they called them our company, and that Luke calls them 2 of them. So I think it's very safe, 99.99% safe to say that the other one was not an apostle either. Cleopas wasn't an apostle. The other one almost positively, certainly was not either. But they were still disciples, and they still had some sort of connection with them because they called them our company. Luke calls them one of them, or 2 of them.
We know that there were people that were following Jesus that weren't part of the 12.
Yeah,
Even from the beginning.
yeah, like all those women that are just mentioned here. So Jesus breaks down the scriptures and says, this is about the Christ. It says about himself, but he didn't mean me. He still hasn't told them it's me. He's telling them these things are about the Christ. Luke, telling us about it, says, because he's already told us that the man is Jesus, he says he's talking about himself. But to them, he was talking about the Christ, just like he said. It wasn't not necessary that the Christ should suffer, not that I should suffer, but that the Christ should suffer. Just want to make that clarification. So this conversation seems to have taken, quite a bit of the rest of the journey. It says, so they drew near to the village to which they were going. He acted as if he were going farther. What does that mean? He's not going to Emmaus. He keeps going. He's like, all right, good talking to you, whatever. Yeah, I'm going to keep going home or whatever. But they urged him strongly, saying, stay with us. It's toward evening, and the day is now far spent. So he did. He went in to stay with them. And when he was at table with them, he took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight. Poof. They said to each other, Did not our hearts burn within us while he talked to us on the road, while he opened to us the Scriptures?" So they invite him to stay with them. He does, or to go in with them. He does. There's no indication of how long he was there. But I guess they sat down to eat. That's why he took the bread that they had prepared or whatever to give to him, or to eat. They just walked 7 miles after all, about. What's that?
This would have been the 11th bread for that time of Passover.
Oh, unleavened. Yes. Yes, that's correct. So there's no real indication of what exactly open. I think it's safe to say, in the same way that something was preventing them from recognizing him, that thing now was lifted from their eyes. I guess you could make the argument that depending on how close, to the inner circle of apostles and disciples they were, the way that he did this would have helped, like something triggered, then they recognized him, the way he broke the bread and whatever. But it seems to me that when it says their eyes were opened, that's just as passive as their eyes were kept from recognizing him. So the veil is lifted. And as soon as they recognize him, he disappears. But then they're thinking back, and they're kind of saying, "We kind of knew it all along. Well, I knew it was him." They're not really saying that, but it's kind of, they're in hindsight, they're thinking, I felt strength. I felt there was something while he was teaching us, while he was talking to us. Or here's what they said, the way they described what he did. He opened to us the Scriptures. And by the way, that's what we need to help do for people as well. 100% of misunderstanding and false teaching is based on the Scriptures not being opened to people. And I don't mean literally like this. I mean looking into it to understand what it says, especially in correlation to itself in other places. They knew the Scriptures. I would assume just as much as the next Jew knew the Scriptures. But never, in regard to the Christ, had they been opened to them until Jesus, on this day, opened. He didn't just open the Scriptures to them, he opened their minds to the Scriptures so that they understood. So they're in that, hindsight, that 20/20 hindsight, are thinking, I knew something was up. And the other one's probably saying, no, you did not. It's like, yeah, I knew something. But now, guess what? The news just keeps stacking on top of each other. They're so excited. Remember, they said to Jesus, why don't you come in? It's getting late. We don't know how long Jesus was there. He may have been there 15 minutes for all we know. Yeah, I mean, they may have already had, he just had some bread, put the bread down, let's sit down and have a little bite, whatever. However late it was at this point, that very hour, they're going all the way back to Jerusalem. Now, they just got back about 7 miles, but they're not waiting until morning. That same hour, they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem. They found the 11, there's your key that they're not apostles, and those who were with them gathered together, saying, the Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon. Then they told what had happened on the road and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. So, it's not exactly clear. It seems that when they walked in, they heard them saying, they were told, the Lord has risen indeed. He's appeared to Simon. They didn't tell them, the 11, that. They heard it from them. And then they told what they had just experienced on top of that. So now we got the women's testimony, the at least partial confirmation of the empty tomb. Now he's appeared to Simon, they learn, and now they're going to learn this that he appeared to Cleopas and this other disciple, who, by the way, I'll just throw out there, could have been Luke himself. Just there's a 50-50 chance. Just a thought. Could have been. I have no clue. But it would at least be in line with John's custom of not naming himself. If he said two of them, but he gave one's name. He didn't give the other one's name. But anyway, now they're telling them. They could not wait to tell. I don't know about you, but I would at least feel I would be at least compelled by the reasonableness of maybe we'll just wait till the morning. We'll get up early. We just got back. By the time we get there, it's going to be very late. Yeah, gate might be closed. It's going to be middle of the night, surely. Yeah, the energy or lack thereof was not a problem for them. They were wired. Even if they waited, it's not like they're just going to be able to lay down and go to sleep after this. We're going right back. So who cares if it's the middle of the night by the time we get there? And however late it was, notice that the 11 were up and people gathered together with them for the same reason. They've seen Jesus, or at least Simon had at this point. The women, Simon, and now them. And that is the account of Jesus appearing on the road to Emmaus. And Cleopas's, I believe that's his sole appearance in the narrative. You can check me on that. I don't feel like he's mentioned again that I can recall. All right, so here's some applications. The chance to see Jesus for oneself was not and will not be afforded to everyone. Wasn't true then, certainly not true now. Those living today must believe in the Lord on the basis of credible testimony. Reminds us of John chapter 20, verse 29. Thomas doubted, said, unless I see him, in fact, he said, I'll never believe. Well, he does see him. And he believes. And Jesus says, have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. And guess what? That's you. That's us as well. All of us. Every single person that's lived ever since Jesus ascended into heaven. With the exception, I guess, of Paul and Stephen, who saw Jesus in ascent. I mean, they saw him. But we have not seen him. But that doesn't mean that we have no reason to believe in him. And Jesus certainly was of that mindset that there's still reason to believe. You know how many things you believe in that you've never seen with your own eyes? You believe in Abraham Lincoln? I do. Guess what? Never seen him. And the list could go on and on and on. Yes, sir. What's that?
Was he absent when these men came to see the apostles?
Was he absent in Luke 24 when they got back? Yeah, if it's the 11, then he would have had to have been there, yeah. It's 24, Luke 24. It's in that verse, the last 3 verses, I think, where the end of verse 33. They found the 11. Now, that would seem to mean that all 11 were there. So that.
And then in verse 45, Jesus opens everyone's understanding again.
Yeah. Yeah. He did a similar thing that he did with those two. Open, except that time it does say it though. I mean, says it differently. Same concept, but different wording. He opened their minds to understand the Scriptures. That's exactly what he was doing for Cleopas and his friend.
You got to understand about the founding of the Lord's church too. One was going to start in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And he gave them a lot of information to think about.
Yeah.
It's like it just uploaded into their brain.
Perhaps. That may be what it sounds like, but I think that's probably just a summary of he went through some explanation like he did with them.
It's uploaded into my brain. When I read the Bible,
Well, that's ideal, yeah.
I'm like, oh, get it.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, it's not, he was just here to redeem Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
How can Jesus say no to them? Okay, he asks them what's wrong, and they tell him. And then he reveals it by speaking it out. And then when they go to their home and they open and they have the bread, it's like, there's power in that bread. I don't know if there was wine that he blessed it or what, but the blood, the bread, didn't he bless it?
It says that's just to bless it is basically another way of saying he prayed over it. He gave thanks. Because sometimes it'll say, if it's mentioned in 2 different gospel records, one of them might say he blessed it and the other one says he gave thanks. So, the idea would be they're the same thing, really.
But weren't they communing, it was on the first day of the week where they communing over the bread?
I think the context seems to indicate that this is not anything to do with the, Lord's Supper or communion, but it's just they're eating, they're having a bite to eat. Which bread, that's kind of a normal.
That's when they recognized.
Yeah, that is when they recognized him. But what's not explained or revealed is why that's when they recognized him, and they don't even. I think some people read into the last phrase there, he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. But to me, that doesn't necessarily mean that the act of breaking the bread is what made them recognize him, but that's when they recognized him. So it's still a matter of, the text doesn't explicitly say the way he broke the bread or whatever caused them to recognize him, but that's just when they recognized him. Now, it may have been the cause of their recognizing him, but it's just there's no way to really confirm that that's what it was. But that is certainly when they recognized him, and then he went poof, disappeared, vanished. But yeah, opening their minds to the Scripture, to understand the Scriptures. The thing about the Jews and their understanding of the Christ was it's really a lesson for us that they understood only half of what the Christ was. But because they only understood half, that and missed the other half, that also caused them then to misunderstand even the half that they understood, if that makes sense. So Was the Christ going to be, a regal figure, a king? Yes, he was going to be a king. But he was also going to be a servant and suffer. They missed that part. And leaving that part out led them to misunderstand what kind of king he was going to be. So they thought he was going to be a king like David. A king that would, a normal, not normal per se, but a normal king just far above what any other king they ever had. And he's going to redeem them from Rome. That's what they thought. Redeem us from oppression and Roman rule. So that should be a lesson for us, that when you miss part of what the prophets and the scriptures have spoken, it can very well lead you to then misunderstand the part that you haven't left out. You have to have the full picture. And that's what Jesus helped them understand, and then he helped them understand it a little bit further down whenever he appeared to the 11 there later in the chapter. Yes, sir.
No, later on, the apostles at the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit, he opened up their minds. I mean, what was supposed to be, and the apostles were totally changed men, and they were thinking in the messages now,
Yeah.
and full. So,
Now that was the moment when, for the 12 at least, it was more or less uploaded into their minds when the Holy Spirit came upon them. Because even 10 days earlier, when Jesus was making his final appearance to them, right before he ascended, he didn't even try to get into it to help them. There was no, he opened their minds to understand the scriptures on that day. He just said, go into the city and wait for the Holy Spirit to come upon you. And that's what they did. And then all of a sudden, they leave that place and they're preaching. And yeah, you get the impression these are the same men, but they're also different. Something's different, and we know that difference was they had received the Holy Spirit, including all that went along with that, of the ability to perform those miracles, and also understand. Now they can preach it because they have a full understanding of it. They can preach it fully because they understand it fully. Again, believing something based on credible testimony is just as valuable and valid as anything else. But even seeing things for yourself doesn't always convince everybody. Don't ever let anybody discourage you by trying to say it's silly to believe something just because somebody else said it. Because even they, like I said, even they believe, a person that would say that believes all kinds of things that they've never seen, never heard, and never will see or hear, but they believe it based on testimony of others. And Christians would profit greatly from a study of passages in each of the three major sections of the Old Testament, like Jesus said, the law, the prophets, and the Psalms, and all of which find their ultimate fulfillment in Jesus. As he said in Luke 24:44, these are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. So just like he helped them understand by going through the scriptures, not literally everyone, but we need to do that for ourselves and for others.